Someone I haven't seen in quite a long time. So it's lovely to be with you.
I'm going. Okay.
Um, I know that you recently had a conversation with my colleague Alan Yarborough, who is now the Director of Government Relations and Global Partnerships. Alan brings his 3 years of YASC service in the Diocese of Haiti, along with more than a decade of federal advocacy experience to this new role. And personally, as his friend and colleague, I'm very excited he's stepping into this new leadership position within our church. And he will actually be joining us in about 22 minutes after the weekly Office of Government Relations call ends. So more to come from Alan about where things are in the world of the Global Partnerships Office at the moment. But um, I'd like to begin our conversation today in the vision that the presiding bishop and executive council have set for the Episcopal Church. And that vision is a strong, adaptive church that communicates and embodies the depth of Christian spirituality and works toward the Episcopal Church's vision of God's kingdom by supporting ministry on the ground in dioceses. And this vision offers both a touchstone and a challenge. As staff, it helps us orient our own ministries. And it's also something that our networks like GEM and dioceses and partners across the church should be aware of and connected to because we are all engaging in this work in our own unique ways. And right now, across the church, at every level of the church, there are conversations happening about how we can be the church that meets this moment faithfully, courageously, and with imagination. Some of those conversations focus on reorienting church-wide structures to better support diocesan and local ministry. Others explore how innovation can create new capacity for mission and leadership across our church. And still others ask how we can more fully communicate and embody the depth of Christian spirituality that animates all of this ministry that we do, and indeed all of our lives. And I don't think this vision is abstract. I think it shapes how we understand missionary service today and how we ultimately live and communicate our faith. It reminds us that mission is not a program or a project, it's a way of being, grounded in relationship and the love of God made visible in the world. And everyone on this call, I think I'm sort of preaching to the choir at this point, but missionary service is about embodying God's love through relationships that cross boundaries, as Titus said earlier, geographical boundaries, cultural boundaries, spiritual boundaries. And people who are called to this type of ministry help form living connections between people and communities across God's world, whether that's with a community halfway around the globe or halfway down the block. And so as we talk today, I would invite us to be thinking together, what does this new vision of a strong, adaptive, and spiritually grounded church look like in the context of missionary service, both today and in the future? As Titus noted in this week's email, we recently held a commissioning service with Young Adult Service Corps and Episcopal Service Corps members. And Bishop Sean led that service and actually commissioned all of our newly serving young adults. And he said, it takes the whole world to know the whole gospel. And I think the mutuality reflected in that statement is at the heart of God's mission and the importance of the growing depth of relationship across the Anglican Communion and across all of the dioceses in the Episcopal Church. As you all know very well, the Episcopal Church is more than just the United States. And one of the things that we can do through missionary service, through the relationship building, is to build internal connections that reinforce who we are as the province of the Episcopal Church, and give us all access to new stories and new forms of inspiration. And the truth that I think is reflected in the vision statement and what I've just said about mission service, I feel is that it's a foundation for what we do, and it guides us as we listen, learn, and imagine how God is calling us to do new things for the sake of the gospel. So, to give you a brief update about where both YASC and Episcopal Volunteers in Mission are, we have recently had in the last few months 3 young adults complete their YASC service between January and September of this year. One is now in his first year at Virginia Theological Seminary. One is planning to enlist in the Marines in January, and with a goal in the next 5 years of becoming a chaplain within the Marine Corps. And one is actually discerning next steps about how she can deepen the connections she made with her host diocese, which was the Diocese of Mexico. And that actually might mean that she would move to Mexico City and spend more time there with the people and communities that she's met. For 2025 and 2026, we have a cohort of 6 young adults, 2 of whom are actually in their placements. The others are awaiting visa processing or are actually still waiting for the appointments to go and have their visas begin that process. We've noticed that this year, all of those things are taking longer. And 2 of our 6 young adults this year are actually from the Diocese of Haiti, which, as I'm sure all of you know, adds multiple layers of logistical and bureaucratic complication. But of our 6, it's exciting this year. We have 2 young adults from the Diocese of Haiti. We also have our first 2 Indigenous young adult Service Corps members. 2 of our 6 members are members of the Navajo Nation, one being supported by the Diocese of Arizona and the other being supported by the Diocese of Navajo Land. And we also have a young adult from the Diocese of California and one from the Diocese of Vermont, who was previously in the Episcopal Service Corps and so is continuing her service, but doing that with YASC for this next year. When Alan joins us, he'll be able to speak a little bit more about Episcopal Volunteers in Mission, as some of these conversations we've been having around that program are part of his portfolio now as well. But we currently have 12 Episcopal Volunteers in Mission serving. Some of them live and work year-round in their placement sites, and others are serving in more hybrid roles where they travel to their partner diocese 2 to 4 times a year, but the rest of the year are back in their home diocese, connecting online and doing work that supports the time that they spend in their partner diocese. And as you all know very well, oftentimes placements with Episcopal Volunteers in Mission grow out of existing relationships between dioceses, or grow out of new relationships that people want to deepen. And I think in many ways that intentional connection between being a physical representative of a relationship helps musical soundtrack today. Um, it helps remind us that God's mission is always both local and global at the same time. Those of you who are global mission advocates may remember me talking about that when we gathered at Camp Allen last year. I think part of the gift that those who serve in mission, regardless of where it is, can offer our whole church is to help remind us that there is no separation between local and global mission. And ultimately, our work in all of our respective contexts unites us into broader movements to do amazing things like try to end global hunger or ensure that all children have access to education, and so many other creative and powerful things. I think it can feel isolating sometimes when you are far away from your home context and trying to build relationships with new people, but I feel is a helpful thing to remember that we are all always connected to each other and certainly to God. But this, I think, is a really important way of engaging in God's mission that our whole church can learn from. And so right now, as you all are probably aware, we had a big realignment earlier this year, which has changed a number of things. And so some of the people in the Global Partnerships office that you're used to seeing or connecting with have actually retired, and by all accounts appear to be enjoying retirement very much. Um, but we're in a process of discerning new ways to align Episcopal Volunteers in Mission and YASC, but specifically Episcopal Volunteers in Mission with the church's current needs and the global realities of our partners. And as those conversations happen, I want to assure everyone that this is not a time for contraction or turning inwards. It's a time for creativity, new ways of collaborating, and deepening relationships. And given the state of the United States and the world in general right now, all of this work is a powerful countercultural witness to what we see happening around us that is rooted in the gospel of Jesus of Nazareth. So going forward, we are asking new questions like, how can we use church-wide resources to strengthen the local global connections of dioceses in the Episcopal Church? How might we more intentionally support dioceses in developing their global partnerships that may exist or they may want to try? And ultimately, these types of questions and the conversations that come from them help us discern new opportunities for connection and innovation. And so, alongside our currently existing ministries, we are also dreaming up and experimenting with new forms of collaboration and learning. So, who knows, I may need to come back for a future Mission Thursday conversation to talk about some of that. Um, but one of the things that has been a big change for me this year is that as of February 20th, I was moved from the Global Partnerships Office to a newly created leadership development team. Um, and I've been working very closely with my colleague, Kelsey Rice Bogdan, who coordinates the Episcopal Service Corps, um, which, if you're not as familiar with that program, is a program domestically within the US that brings young adults together in intentional community and service in their local communities that is especially connected to social justice. So the two programs work with basically the same population of young adults, 21 to 35. And as of 2018, both of those programs are now actually under the umbrella of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society or the churchwide staff. And so our new supervisor, the Reverend Twyla Smith, had an inspired idea to bring YASC and ESC into closer collaboration, organizationally, theologically, and practically, so we could explore how these ministries intersect across different contexts and across different generations. And so we are working on a pilot year, which we're not sure if it is actually a calendar year or if it's, I don't know, a metaphorical year. But as part of this time of intentional collaboration, conversation, and working together, we've been having conversations with colleagues and partners across the Episcopal Church and beyond, and hearing a wide range of ideas around formation, service, and leadership. So Kelsey and I, over the summer, conducted 28 interviews with stakeholders across our church, 13 clergy people, including 3 bishops who had some kind of connection to either the Young Adult Service Corps or the Episcopal Service Corps, 15 lay people. 12 of the people we spoke to were alumni of one or both of the programs, and we also spoke with current Episcopal Service Corps directors, as well as some of our international partners who host Yaskers. And what was fascinating about those conversations was certainly the depth and breadth of personal faith and lived experiences, but also how quickly some of the key themes that we've noticed started to emerge. Every single person we spoke to spoke about the importance of community. It was often one of the first pieces they spoke about in terms of their own discernment, their own formation, but also the importance of how having a strong support community and the opportunity to build new and diverse communities is in everyone's mind essential to these types of programs that support young adults being out in God's world, engaging in mission. Another key theme was the strong connection between faith and social justice. And I would perhaps broaden that out a bit to sort of say really about how we take our faith and how we put that into action. So obviously for many of us, that does include a social justice piece. But I think it's a broader sense of we need to learn how to live our lives as disciples of Jesus and to do that in ways that allow us to live into our baptismal covenant promises. And then connected to that was another strong focus on discernment and vocation. And certainly for young adults in their 20s and early 30s, these can be very different types of conversations because some of it is, I just finished college and I have this degree and I don't know what to do. And a number of people also spoke about some of the challenges in these areas right now as our young adults had lived through the COVID pandemic as either high schoolers or as part of, their college experience. And so be skipping some pieces of important sort of social connection, and formation and sort of what does that look like for the church to be the most welcoming and inviting space we can be to be supportive of people as they end up doing some of that work, through their time in either YASC or Episcopal Service Corps. And then because we were specifically asking about young adults, and how our church can offer young adult leadership development and service opportunities, we heard a great deal about the different characteristics and needs of Gen Z, which are really shaping how we think about calling, belonging, and formation in the church today. And what's also been interesting is a number of people we spoke to spoke very eloquently about young adults, but then said, but we have young adults at heart, right? People who are asking some of these big questions as well as they approach retirement or are in retirement or have discerned during the pandemic that they wanted to do something different. And so one of the key pieces I think that is certainly something that GEM is also committed to is this look at how do we connect across generations? How can we be truly intergenerational community? And how do we model that for our whole church? So as we look ahead, we're really, I think, trying to hold both faith and imagination together. Kind of makes me think of that famous quote from the German theologian Karl Barth about when you pray, should have the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other. Um, I think our hands are just going to get more full as we hold our newspapers and our Bibles and our hope and our faith and our imagination, and try to bring all of that into the work that we're all doing right now. Our church, just in general, we are living in a time of rapid change, in our communities, in our church, and across the world. And none of us have all the answers, and that's okay. I would actually say I think that it's good news that we don't have all the answers, though at times it can feel a bit unpredictable and overwhelming because we don't have those answers. We just have questions upon questions. But a good friend of mine likes to say that the sky isn't falling, but the ground is shifting. And I think this is a good description for our church at the moment. We are in the midst of big changes, some brought on by the COVID pandemic, and some happening as we start to have different conversations around how we can be the Episcopal Church now and in the future, and what are things that we may need to sunset, what are things that we may need to try, and sort of everything in between that. So I think it is a time of big possibility. And it's why I think that the presiding bishop and executive council's vision is so vital. We need a strong, adaptive church that embodies deep spirituality and supports ministry on the ground, regardless of where that ground is. I think we're all realizing that we can't simply keep doing what we've always done. And we also can't lose sight of what grounds us, our faith, the spiritual practices that nurture our faith, and our shared commitment to God's mission. And every single person on this call today knows that incarnational ministry transforms lives. I would not be talking with you today if I had not spent 2 years with the Young Adult Service Corps in the Anglican Church of Tanzania. That was my introduction to how the Episcopal Church connects with our siblings across the Anglican Communion. I also don't think that I would be here either if I hadn't spent a semester studying in Russia as an undergraduate or taught English as a second language in a public school in New York City and gotten to know my students and their parents. These experiences and many others since have shown me how God meets us in relationship, across difference, at ground level, and in the holiness of everyday encounter. And so our work of creating space for these holy encounters wherever they happen is essential. And I would argue that it is more important now than ever. Um, and one of the things that is exciting about this year's cohort that connects to creating space for holy encounters that are a little bit different is that we have 4 young adults in YASC this year who are from dioceses that have historically been seen as mission fields, right? People who would receive missionaries, people who would receive short-term mission trips. And what's really exciting about this year is that they all have the opportunity to go to partner dioceses around the world to share their faith, their wisdom, and their experiences. And by supporting that work, it helps us live into the fullness of our identity as members of the Episcopal Church, and creates space and possibility for unique transformation and relationship, and helps tell a broader story of who we are as the Episcopal Church. And certainly members of the Standing Commission who are on this call, or previous members who are on this call, know that telling the fullness of our story as the Episcopal Church is hard work. It can be challenging, but it is absolutely essential for all of us to be able to live more fully into who God calls us to be. So as we move forward, our hope is really to keep expanding those spaces of encounter, to keep them inclusive or to make them even more inclusive, and to keep learning together how God is calling us into relationship and service. And so we're in a season of new questions and conversations. And when we break for Q&A a bit later after Alan joins us, I would really look forward to hearing not only your questions, but also your perspectives. What are you seeing in your context, and how do you imagine missionary service evolving in this new moment for our church? And so hopefully Alan is just about here, not quite. So I'll maybe pause there, and Titus, if you have a question or a comment that you want to share as we wait for Alan, please feel free. And you're muted, Titus.
And if I can add, this is Martha. If I can ask a question, Titus, after you've spoken, before Alan joins us, I would love to.
Okay, great. Alan just joined us, but I'm sure he will be patient. So Titus, please.
Okay, over to you, Martha, for your question.
Thanks. And thanks, Elizabeth. I just love the way you talk and how you present these things. Thank you. I was just curious. First of all, please tell Kelsey hello, since, as you know, she was in the Diocese of Massachusetts. I had no idea she was playing this role with you, so that's great. But I'm wondering, as you're looking at like the YAS program particularly, what I like about the Episcopal Service Corps program, certainly in Boston and Newark when I was there, is of course the young adults are living together in community and doing a lot of spiritual development together and prayer and eating meals, etc.
Mhm.
That's often not the case with Yask, except when I was in Liverpool a couple of years ago, I was able to visit the house there because you had three Yask members, one from Haiti and no, one from Haiti, and then I guess there was somebody from Africa. Anyway, young adults again living in house, and I just think that you can't do that all the time. But is that a model you might explore, putting kind of more Yask together in a place so that they can have that intentional community together and support one another as well as serve the community?
Yes, that's actually a conversation that my boss and I had a couple weeks ago as we are looking at new ideas and new models. The Lutheran young adult program, which is called Young Adults in Global Mission,
Hmm.
operates sort of in that way. They have a limited number of places. It's about six or seven around the world, and then people go to those places in groups. Again, whether they live together or they still live in the same city or nearby, there's an opportunity for that kind of collaboration. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not sure that the exact model that the ELCA uses would be replicable for the Episcopal Church, but the idea is certainly to say, let's look at sending people in twos or threes or fours, perhaps.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Definitely on
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I definitely could see the advantage of it. Thanks. Thanks, Titus.
Thank
absolutely.
you so much, Martha, and thank you so much, Elizabeth. We now have
Alan,
Alan Yarborough with us, who is the
I
new
do
Director
apologize for
of Global
interrupting.
Partnerships.
When there's a question, can we slow it down a little bit in order for me to, and
absolutely.
then can you give me a moment so that when you answer, I can repeat the answer for the people who might want to listen? Thank
I
you.
Very,
apologize.
very good
That's
point,
okay. That's
Alan.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, Alan.
Alan is the new Director of Global Partnerships, and he is also continuing as the Director of the Office of Governmental Relations. The two offices are not fused, as I understand it, but obviously working in collaboration. Welcome to you, Alan, and we're delighted to have a presentation from you at this time.
Great, thank you, Titus. I really appreciate that. And yeah, so still overseeing or will be overseeing both of these offices, and was just on our Office of Government Relations weekly network call. So that's why I couldn't make the first half of this. So really grateful for you all inviting me into this space, and your understanding for me coming in halfway through. Elizabeth and I have been in touch about the missionary program, so I've heard, I imagine, most of what Elizabeth shared in some form. But grateful also for the platform that you've all given for her to speak to the missionary programs of the church and her work there under the leadership development team. I don't have a whole lot sort of lengthy prepared, but would welcome questions and just want to sort of talk a bit about the current direction we're hoping to see global partnerships go, and sort of how it fits into the public policy partnership and witness part of the presiding bishop staff. So for those of you all know, Canon Chuck Robertson, it is in many ways the team beyond offices the term that we used during presiding Bishop Curry's tenure as presiding bishop. And it includes the Global Partnerships Office, Government Relations, Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations, and then Episcopal Migration Ministries. So the four offices are still working quite closely together. It's a little loud in the office today. It's nice because we're all gathering. People are coming in to DC and are gathering for a strategy day tomorrow. That I'm looking forward to. And uh, as a part of that work of public witness, sort of being the church in the public square, so to speak, the church that is we're the offices that are interfacing with other parts of the Anglican Communion, other faith organizations, the U.S. government, the United Nations. We're obviously in a moment of deep concern with U.S. politics, with increased areas of conflict. Just spoke briefly about our cautious hope around the ceasefire and hostage and prisoner exchange deal. Um, that broke last night. There's a draft statement on that sitting on my external monitor right now that we're working on. But in terms of responding to this moment, we've been framing the work around an acronym LEAPS, litigation, education, advocacy, prayer, and service. Happy to put that in the chat. I can type it out momentarily. But litigation, education, advocacy, prayer, and service. That this is how I think the church should be responding in this moment, recognizing that certainly each of those require different skills. We will be engaging with them in different ways. But that as a church-wide office, we're trying to pursue all of those avenues as a means to respond to addressing human needs, peacekeeping, what is needed for our relationship building and being followers of Jesus in the world. So the global partnerships work fits into that, I think very well. I think the litigation piece is probably a little less relevant. As I mentioned, they require different skills. They're different um, reasons to engage in any one of those five components of our work. But then specifically for the global partnerships piece, we're working on shifting to have a bit more sort of a goal-oriented or having goal-oriented model of talking about the work, even as the fundamentals of relationship building remain a key piece of the office and the church. So what are those sort of three goals or three priority areas? We're looking at addressing human needs, peace building, and then lifting the voices of Episcopalians and Anglicans globally as our three priority areas. In a more detailed way, I think I'll start from the third and work my way back up. So raising voices, is a part of what Jim does. It's a part of what we've done as a church, connecting um, bishops to one another, giving people a platform through webinars, through other resources, social media videos. Elizabeth, of course, doing a lot of that. Also, in her time with the Global Partnerships Office, and then continuing with the current missionary programs, just to really promote what relationship can be and what good models of mission can be. We think that's really important for people to stay informed about topics that are in the news that we may be more familiar with, but also to lift up the voices of those who are perhaps more marginalized or not as much in the spotlight. How do we use our platforms to lift them up? A sort of brief or one simple example of many would be the webinar we did a couple of months ago now on Yemen. It's a place that still is in great need and experiencing a lot of difficulty, but does not get a lot of attention in the same way, and certainly for legitimate reasons, but doesn't get as much attention as other areas of conflict. So this lifting up the voices of Episcopalians and Anglicans globally on the peace building side, that is, I think, probably where the advocacy and education pieces often come into play. We're trying to think how do we better integrate the work of global partnerships officers with the Office of Government Relations. As Titus, as you said, it's not to merge the offices or the work, but it is to say, even just information sharing and getting the perspective of our Anglican Communion partners directly into places of power and influence in DC can be really helpful. The US, for better or for worse, has a lot of influence abroad. The UN, the same way, has a lot of potential. And so, how can we play a role in lifting up those voices, the perspectives of the church in South Sudan and the Congo, in Haiti and Central America? How do we play a role in the peace building efforts and empower those parts of the church through the advocacy pieces, through direct engagement, and then on addressing human needs, we hope is similarly to peace building, it's a framing that hopefully allows us to connect with various parts of the communion in some form. We recognize there are, of course, areas of disagreement and tension around the Anglican Communion, but we hope that the framing of addressing human needs and peace building allows us to have an introduction, to have a starting point where we can work together, even while we also pursue continuing work around lifting up women's leadership, both ordained and lay, supporting the African women bishops, which of course is a key part of both peace building and addressing human needs. So we're not trying to overshadow that. It's a critical piece of this work, but it's just sort of how we're framing it and talking about it. Um, so that is that's a short overview, but I'll stop there and welcome any questions that you all may have on how this work will move forward.
Thank you so much, Alan. That is very, very helpful. Any footnotes from you, Elizabeth, before we turn to questions?
No, I mean, I think, again, one of the things that certainly there are a couple people on this call who should be particularly proud of is the impact that YASC alumni are having on our church. Alan, of course, former YASCer. I'm a former YASCer. We have our first ever bishop, who I know the GEM board just met with last week, who served in Mexico in YASC. You know, about 25% of the alumni of the program over the last 25 years are now deacons or priests in the Episcopal Church, serving in parishes and cathedrals, on diocesan staffs. We have active lay leaders, again, in full-time church employees or volunteers. And so really part of what we also want to be doing in this time is celebrating everything that has happened. I think we have new vision, we have new ideas, and none of this work is starting from scratch. It was really happening, being built on a strong foundation, and people who have had the transformational, incarnational experience of living with and being in community with people across all parts of God's world are active participants in these conversations, which I think is a really exciting thing for us, those of us who get to be part of some of these conversations, but really for our whole church as we see what emerges and what new things we can do together.
Such a great footnote, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Okay, questions from the group. Any questions for Elizabeth or for Alan? Diane Wright.
Thank you, Titus. So the main question I have is, or my understanding is that YASC is kind of going on as it has. So for those of us that are GMAs, or I work with students on a college campus, go promote YASC. Is that true?
Yes.
Let's let Dianata have a moment to translate into Spanish. Okay, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yes. So one of the things that is coming out of this closer collaboration with my colleague Kelsey and Episcopal Service Corps is that for the first time in December, we will be launching a common application for both YASC and the Episcopal Service Corps. So that's being built out with all of the behind the scenes things that help us capture what people are actually interested in. But that was one of the first things that we thought, well, in this pilot year, let's actually try something different with how we encourage people to apply. So it's definitely, there will still be opportunities for that. And so that we anticipate that will come out in sort of early to mid-December.
Thank you, because I saw the deadline online at least says January 30th for applications.
Yes, that may need to be tweaked a little bit now, but the application will open in December.
And my second question / comment relates to Episcopal volunteers in mission. And I guess I'm curious, I know that's being reimagined, and I'm a little curious about the pros versus cons. And I'm just wondering, as we try to think about how this program can be reimagined, I feel that our church could use ambassadors for global mission, right? So to me, it seems that if that program is not very visible or sort of played down, how does that have a negative impact on global mission engagement altogether? Or how can it be flipped that maybe people that are very, I think most of the people on this call, people that are very engaged in global mission can be considered in some way like EVIMs, Episcopal Volunteers in Mission, and can be for the church itself ambassadors for global mission?
Definitely. Great question. I'll wait for Dayanara. Sorry, I got too excited to answer the question.
We like your excitement, Elizabeth.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so I do not have like a solid answer for you in this, other than to say that part of what's been happening at really every level of the church is looking at how do we support what is happening within our diocese. So obviously, global mission advocates, companion relationships, all of those pieces I think are part of a broader conversation. And we're not looking at doing away with, mission opportunities for people over the age of 35 or anything like that. It's really looking at, you know, what is the history of missionary service in our church? How have we seen that change? I mean, just in the decades of service across represented in this call, obviously there have been a lot of changes. I think with the last reimagining of Episcopal Volunteers in Mission, what was an idea didn't necessarily turn into practice in a way that was 100% reflective of that idea. And so that is part of why I think we do need to really have some conversations around what is actually needed. How can we resource things that are already happening, but in no way do we want to say that we will have less global engagement, because I think you're right, Diane, that the communion does need the witness and the experience and the wisdom and the relationships of the Episcopal Church. And so I would maybe turn that to Alan as our new director of global partnerships, as they go into their strategic conversation tomorrow, because I know that this is actually part of that conversation.
Yeah, just to add a couple of things to what Elizabeth shared that I think are helpful. Those of you who are on the Standing Commission on World Mission heard me make a comment along these lines last week. I wish it were the case that, in the Episcopal Church in the United States in particular, that we could say, hey, the Anglican Communion, and people would get excited about it. That just isn't in practice what happens. And so one of the things we're thinking about in global partnerships offerings is how do we hook people? How do we catch their attention and then hopefully bring in the global mission perspectives, the principles of international relationship, the whole list of things that I think this group knows well, and values. How do we get people's attention to care about it and to join in? And so I think Elizabeth, I'm projecting a bit here, but to me, the fusion of Episcopal Service Corps and Young Adult Service Corps applications in part is saying, hey, there is a bigger thing that we can advertise that will get attention. And let's make sure there's a global piece within that. And I hope, my fingers are crossed, that we'll have some success with that. So yeah, I think that is thematically in line with what you were saying.
Yeah. And I think the other piece in this is that one of Bishop Sean's priorities on day one in an email he sent to us, as staff, was that he wants to do away with departments not working with each other. He really has a vision of you serve on the presiding bishop staff, you work for the DFMS. We are one team. And I think that's only going to make some of these conversations even more nuanced and rich. Um, but I think the other thing that we've seen over the last 11 months and 8 days and into Bishop Sean's tenure, obviously his anniversary is coming up, is that conversation and listening are an essential piece of everything that has been happening. Um, we've filled out surveys, we've done focus groups as staff, and obviously that's happened at all levels of the church as well. And I think that that is a commitment that I know Alan and I personally feel very strongly about, that whatever we're doing at the church-wide level needs to serve the church. It's not just about my ideas or Alan's ideas or I see Daniel's on our call, Daniel's ideas. It's like, here are some thoughts, and let's talk with people who are passionate about this particular type of ministry. How is this sitting? That's actually happening for YASC and Episcopal Service Corps over the next couple of weeks as we take the executive summary and analysis of all of the interviews we did and present them to certain focus groups to say, here's what we heard, here's kind of what we're thinking. What do you think? And that will be part of the conversation around, okay, how do we move this forward? Or do we have an idea that we think was going to go this way, but it's actually going to go this way based on some of the conversation we had? So we're definitely not looking at operating in a vacuum or making decisions in isolation.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We have a question from Paul Rajan, who's a member of the Standing Commission on World Mission and also the president of GEM. Paul, over to you.
I think part of my question was asked by Diane as well. I still will like to put it up there to Alan as well as Elizabeth. GM is a big network of, becoming a good network of representatives for the church in the diocese. But a lot of this, YASC and as well as the service course and other things, if it can be channelized through these network, it can reach to the grassroots level groups of people and churches. And I think we need to do more on that. So my question is, are there any attempts being made to have this network stabilized and also increased? And, I know putting it up there in ENS or any other media, we think that we reach people, but then it has to go through priests and bishops and the dioceses and their convention. If it can go to the targeted number of, audience, the age group, I also believe it relies more for the future of our church, the younger generations.
Let's let Dayanara complete the translation of that question. And then over to you, Elizabeth.
Well, I saw Alan unmuted himself first, so I'm going to let his enthusiasm start us off.
Alan.
Okay. I think so. One of the pieces I'm excited about as a result of the realignment on churchwide staff are the new ways we're collaborating across departments. One of those will be through our colleague Allison Duvall. She's been with Episcopal Migration Ministries, and many of you may know her. And we have had a number of, for lack of a better term, we've had a number of volunteer programs that have taken different forms. So we are working on a review of those, what worked, what didn't. Can there be a better way to structure them and manage them? And hope to have more on that soon. And that includes, doing an assessment of the global mission advocates. The resolution from General Convention on those, I think, is a little bit difficult to know who is officially responsible for managing that group. And I think that's creating a bit of a roadblock for that moving forward. But so I'll continue. I've already talked to Emily, the head of the Standing Commission on World Mission, about this, but we'll have additional conversations about it because it is a good opportunity. But we want to draw from the lessons we have from other forms of volunteer networks in the church.
Thank you so much. The final
I,
question will be from Nancy Searby, who asks, well, do you want to just read that out for us, Nancy?
Sure, thank you. And it's great to have everyone here. Yeah, so I was thinking about the idea of like combining the domestic and the global as a way to work. And I know that we have a diaspora around the world as well that is engaged, say, for example, United States, South Sudan. Alan, I think you and I are talking both to a bishop that's coming into town. And so I'm just curious, in your wondering and imagining, have you thought about that relationship between the diaspora here as compared to the broader Anglican Communion and as a way to draw it to interest, maybe, like you said, into global?
Yeah,
Let's let
go ahead, Elizabeth.
Dianata translate that first. Okay, over to you, Alan.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. Part of the approach to that will be improving how global partnerships, I think, interacts with what have been called ethnic missioners on the church-wide staff. And a piece of that is looking at the non-US dioceses, but it also is about diaspora engagement. So there's, I think, work and growth to be done there. There's opportunity there. I'll share the caveat, and this isn't, it's just the difficulty of working with across difference. But diaspora groups can sometimes be quite fractured, and can actually not be as connected to their home country. And so that presents challenges sometimes. As we're, focused for global partnerships work, we're focused on the relationships in the communion. Sometimes there can be some gaps, but that doesn't mean it's not an opportunity, that there's not a chance to play a role, to invigorate people. I mean, there's some wonderful, wonderful diaspora relationships in the US.
Thank you, Alan. Well, we've come to the end of our time. This has been rich, and it's been, well, to use your term, Elizabeth, nuanced, just lovely, terrific. Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you so much, Elizabeth. And let's all continue to support the mission program of the Episcopal Church and also the mission outreach from dioceses and agencies and congregations. It's really just a multifaceted outreach that the Episcopal Church has. Just a couple of notes. One is to remind you about the Diocese of New York Global Mission Fair that will be held this Saturday, the 11th of October. And the details of that are in the chat. And then also to give you a heads up about the next Mission Thursday, which will be November 13th, when we will hear about youth in mission formation. And we'll hear from teenagers and adults from the Diocese of Maine under the guidance of Emily Keniston, who is the chair of the Standing Commission on World Mission. And the November 13th Mission Thursday will not be in the afternoon, it'll be in the evening. Why? Because the teenagers will be in school. So that will be at 7 p.m. on Thursday, November 13th. We'll welcome you back again at that time, and we'll hope to have any confusion about meeting IDs sorted out by then. And thank you so much for being here with us. Sorry that not more were able to get onto this particular call, but we'll hope for better luck next time. Well, God bless you all. Thank you so much, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.